Hello, basketball fans. It's DC Hewitt here from Fantasy Basketball Analyzer, and I'm here to help you get ready for Week 14 in the NBA season. Got an interesting week with the schedule, both for fantasy and just real-life schedule, if you think about it. So we'll talk games played, strength of schedule, back-to-backs like usual, and then we did a little waivers last week, and that seemed to be successful, so we'll throw some more players that might be worth picking up off the waiver wire to plug in for Week 14. All right, let's get started with our weekly matchups. Look at how many games teams are playing. So the two games, those are really where we got to concern ourselves. Charlotte and Milwaukee. Those teams only played 2 games. Charlotte, I think you got to rest them all. Milwaukee, could probably still play Giannis, but I really draw the line at that. I don't think you have a better matchup than Giannis. But 4 games versus 2, sometimes they could still play it. You might have to crunch the numbers a little. Take a look at the 30-day averages, I'd say, on anyone you're looking up against, and just do the multiplication. They're averaging this over 30 days, so-and-so times 4 games, Giannis times 2, and see how it looks. Giannis has some pretty good matchups this week. That's why I think you could still sneak him in. But even someone like Middleton or whatever, I'm still sitting down. 3-game weeks, you can read them to yourself. We only have 8 teams with 3 games. Most of the teams this week are playing 4 games. So even if you're playing a 3-game week, you're at a pretty significant disadvantage unless it's one of your superstars. That's also why I think Charlotte and Milwaukee are almost completely unplayable, because most teams are playing 4 games. If you're in a weekly locks league, you're going to be at a real disadvantage. You can get some of those players in there. If you're in a daily change leagues and you happen to have some Dallas players or pick up some Dallas players, the schedule disadvantage doesn't stand out as much. It might actually be an advantage because Dallas plays kind of on the off days when other teams aren't playing, so you can work them into your lineups a lot. So let's go ahead and take a look. For anyone new to the show, when we're talking about strength of schedule, what we use is Hollinger's numbers for both pace of play, defensive efficiency, and we average them out to find who we want to attack. Because it's not just about playing the good defenses. If you're playing faster, there's more rebounds, there's more missed shots, there's more chance for turnovers on both sides of the ball. More possessions equal more fantasy goodness. So even though someone like Milwaukee has one of the best defenses in the league, in fact, this week, if you look at it, they have the best defense in the league overall per Hollinger's numbers. They play at such a fast pace of play that they're not the team that you got to be most afraid of. The names at the top and the bottom are our usual suspects. You want to go against Washington, Atlanta, New Orleans, Memphis, Cleveland, and the stout defenses, Toronto, Orlando, Philly, Lakers, all the way up to Denver, Boston, Indiana, Utah. I actually highlighted more players, more teams as negative matchups because they're all clustered there at the 102 mark now. No one's at any lower. They're all in the same range. So I actually tagged a few more teams like Utah and Indiana, but they're our usual suspects. They've all just kind of glommed together there in a pack. So if we're going to look at those pace of play numbers and then jump right into our weekly schedule. All right, for our weekly schedule, you can look at it. We're highlighting green and red, the plus and minus matchups. Like I said, Charlotte and Milwaukee, probably stay away. But the interesting thing about Milwaukee, if you do have to play someone there, if you don't have a better bench option, is to play Charlotte and Chicago in the reverse order of what I just said. And you're not too afraid of either of those matchups. Chicago's had some good defensive guards, but their front line is decimated. Gafford went down now too, so they're without both of their big men. So they're even softer down low for you to attack. You're not afraid of Lauri Markkanen stopping anyone. And Charlotte is not a good defensive team, but they play at a slow pace. So Milwaukee plays at a really fast pace that kind of neutralizes each other. You should still expect a good game. So if you got to plug in Giannis and Middleton, go for it. But I would make sure you're sitting down Hill or anyone else that you might be playing for. And like I said, I don't even think you play Middleton this week if you can avoid it. For the 3-game weeks, some of the teams that are playing 3 games on the upside, actually have some decent weeks. So Cleveland's got New York, Washington, Chicago. You're not really afraid of them there. Dallas has Clippers, Portland, Utah. So Utah and Clippers aren't super desirable. But if you look at the schedule overall, they're getting to play Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Those are all the days with lesser games. So in a weekly locks league, this doesn't really help you. They've got 3 games. Of course, you're going to play Luka, but you're at a disadvantage if you're playing anyone like Maxi Kleber or something. If you're in a daily change league, I think Dallas' schedule is really advantageous and maybe even worth making sure that Kleba or Powell aren't available on your waiver wire, because you'd get to rotate them in on all these slow games. I mean, there's only one game on Tuesday, and Dallas is a part of it. So if you go ahead and look at the schedule like that, if you're in a daily change, if you don't have a games limit on your season overall, there's some advantages that you can capitalize there. A couple of the other 4-team weeks that had schedules that kind of stood out to me. Detroit, they get to play Washington, Sac, Memphis, and Brooklyn. You're not afraid of any of those. Chicago plays Milwaukee, Minnesota, Sac, Cleveland. Those are all decent matchups. Milwaukee's not that great of a matchup, but overall, their pace of play makes up for it a bit. And then you're playing some pretty weak teams in Minnesota, Sacramento, Cleveland for the rest of the week. We'll get into some more of that for matchups that we like and stuff as I talk about waivers. I'll go a little more in depth with that this week. So let's go ahead and switch. You can already see here the strength of schedule. You can always pause it, rewatch the video, give me an extra view. I don't hate that. But let's go ahead and switch the schedule over to look at our back-to-backs and take a look. So the only team with the weekend back-to-back, so if you pick someone up in a daily change league, use a single waiver move to lock them in, is Brooklyn. They get Detroit and the Knicks. So they're both matchups you like, and they're playing back-to-back. So if you can pick up Brooklyn, someone on, say, Thursday when they're playing the Lakers, you can keep them in there and keep them streamed for your second half of the week. I'm not sure who would be available in your league. Of course, that's true anytime I talk about waivers, but maybe someone like Taurean Prince or something is out there. And if they're playing on off days, maybe you can cycle them in. It's also worth noting at the end of the week for Houston and Orlando, I've got them flagged as having a back-to-back. That's because they actually play on Monday. So this is the first game of their back-to-back. But neither Houston or Orlando are teams that really worry us with the back-to-back. Maybe Westbrook might be sitting there, so it's something to consider. If you've got Westbrook and you're looking at Houston with a 4-game week, maybe it's really 3 if you're trying to split hairs. For the teams that do worry us a little with back-to-back because they rest people somewhat consistently, Memphis, no back-to-back. We don't have to worry about them resting any young guys. The Clippers, they do have a back-to-back there with Dallas and Atlanta. So they might be sitting down someone to get a rest, probably against Atlanta, and not too scared of that matchup, especially going to the East Coast. So you look at that. If you're in a weekly locks league, you might be getting one less game out of Kawhi. But by now, if you're this far into the season and you got Kawhi, you're probably a bit used to preparing for that. All right, talked fast and kind of shot through the rundown for the weekly schedule. You can go back, like I said, and rewatch or pause, or I'll include a link to look at the sheets on your own time, just to be as helpful as I can to give you guys the tools. Let's go ahead and talk about some people who might be available today, if you're watching it on Sunday, and your free agent wire to pick up, get them in your weekly lock, or if you're in daily change league, of course, you can always pick them up and stuff. Also, I didn't start it at the top of the show. Maybe we'll have to edit this in, but Monday, Martin Luther King Day, almost every team is playing except for 2, and they will start their games early. If you normally set your roster later at your lunch break or something on Monday, if you're watching this then, you might already be too late. If you are, give me a don't Homer Simpson in the comments that you missed yours, because I think we've all been there. But hopefully you're watching this before and getting your lineup set before they lock on Monday. There's a lot of basketball and there should be some good fun games. I don't want your fantasy schedule locking ruining the good basketball that you're going to get to watch on Monday. All right, as we dive into waivers, I want to set up how I like to think about things. I like to start with the cutoff of 66% ownership on Yahoo. I use Yahoo because the numbers are easy to find. 66% ownership means that people are available in 1/3 of Yahoo leagues. Now, if you're watching this channel or you're in deeper leagues, they're probably not available, but not everyone's in a deep league. Sometimes people are first-time fantasy players. So I like to give a little more info. I think these players, if they're at 66, they're available in 1/3 of leagues. They should be on your watch list even if they're owned. Someone might cut them. They might get a bad week, and it's a good time to pounce. So I start there, and then I go a little bit deeper. When we get to the bottom third, so meaning that they're only owned in 33% or less, those players I'm going to look at for kind of specialists for certain category leagues and stuff. So if you're in a points league, maybe they're value to you, but maybe not so much. We're talking like the Kris Dunns of the world who are getting you some steals. So let's dive in and take a look. I didn't change this at all. 66% ownership, Brandon Clarke. This is the exact same graphic I used to start the season for my Check Your Waiver Wire issue. So right there at the top, 66% owned. Brandon Clarke, I think, is getting a little overlooked because he's not one of the big 2 in Memphis, but this player is really good and really exciting in Dynasty. I definitely think he's worth picking up. He doesn't do anything spectacularly, but he's a really solid ownership, and I'm just excited to have another Memphis player on here. I felt like I wore my Ja hoodie the right time last week before Ja like blew up against Houston and blew up Twitter. All right, 65% ownership, OG Anunoby. This is just one of my guys. I really like him. I always do. He's had it up and down. So I'm going to read off his last 3 stat lines because he kind of like exploded and then left a wet fart, I guess. So 21, 5, 5, and 3 steals. 18 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, and 4 steals. Awesome. And then he comes back with 2 points and 3 rebounds and nothing more. That's not going to do it for us. So his ownership might be a little bit down, but Toronto's got 4 games this coming week. He plays Atlanta, Philly, New York, and San Antonio. Other than Philly, you're not really afraid of any of those matchups. OG should get, hopefully he has a more up week than a down week, but he could be a good fill-in if he's available for you, and he could be good throughout the rest of the year, especially in daily change leagues where you can grab him and try and play some matchups. Then again, his bad game was against Minnesota, so I don't know how you predict his matchups without, losing all your hair and looking like me. All right, 64% ownership, Jeff Teague for Atlanta. He just got traded. I'm surprised he isn't owned more. He was owned pretty highly when he wasn't really worth starting for Minnesota, but now he's in Atlanta, and he's doing really well. I think he should be picked up. It's just check, see if you can get him. If you can, try and work him into your lineup. 64%, Thomas Zadaransky. I keep talking about Zadaransky. He's good kind of overall. He's had a bad couple of games here, but if you need assists and stuff, he's a good pickup. Maybe he's on my mind because Keith, one of the fans who always comments, and I appreciate that, Keith, had said as a Bulls fan, I have to be happy with Sato. I am, but also the team's not really going anywhere. So, but he's a good all-around player. But if we want to go for assists, there's fultz, 55% ownership, and also just got to be one of the best stories of the NBA this year. Like maybe he's not getting mentioned as like most improved player and stuff like that because we got people like Siakam and Luka jumping off the page. But fultz, like coming back, being solid, kind of saving the shadow of a career we once saw is really exciting. 48% Taurean Prince is there. I don't love him, but I like his schedule this week. If you need someone, he's not going to give you much more than points. He's not doing a ton for like an all-around game, but Brooklyn gets to play, or has to play Philly and the Lakers, which aren't great, but if you're in a daily change league, they have the weekend back-to-back against Detroit and the Knicks on Saturday, Sunday, and no one else has that matchup. So if you could pick up Taurean Prince in a daily change league, you can get 3 games in 4 days, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday out of Taurean Prince, and for that, it might be worth getting in there and cycling in because it's a really busy week. Lots of teams with 4 games. You're not going to get to stream a lot of guys if you're in the daily change league, so that's going to be an option for that. All right, switching over to maybe the more helpful list, the one that more people are going to be wanting. I'm starting off with Dillon Brooks, available in about half of leagues, a little bit more from Memphis. Again, maybe, I've been talking about Memphis all season on this show and just to friends and family because they've been an exciting team. It feels like the rest of the viewers who aren't watching League Pass as much as me are waking up to it, and that's pretty exciting. But Dillon Brooks is going to give you points and threes specialization, but he's been blowing up, and Memphis has a really good schedule this week. They get to play New Orleans. Boston's not a great matchup. Detroit, Phoenix. You're not really afraid of that. 4 games. That's going to be strong. Fast pace of play when they go against New Orleans. He could put up a lot of points for you. Eric Gordon, he's available in about half of leagues. By now, everyone, I feel like, who plays fantasy knows what Eric Gordon is. The reason I added him to the list is besides them getting 4 games, Houston also has that pseudo back-to-back this week because they played Denver twice this week. The second matchup on Sunday is the first of a doubleheader. It's possible that, and I don't know this yet, but it's possible that Westbrook gets rest, which means Eric Gordon could get some more minutes. Even if he doesn't, Eric Gordon might be worth a play here if you're needy or trying to recover from injuries. He's got 4 games. Javale Mcgee also at 45% ownership. Fremont's own Javale Mcgee from Fremont, Michigan. I mentioned that because I want to give a shout out to my buddy Drew, who just bought his first house there in Fremont, Michigan, where our favorite knucklehead, Javale Mcgee, is from. He's playing for the Lakers. If you need blocks, this is your guy. He's available in over half of leagues, and he's been destroying it. He gets 4 games. You go ahead, plug him in, and he's going to specialize for you. He plays against Boston, Knicks, Brooklyn, Philly. So he's got a couple rough games in there, but Philly's also on that Saturday. So if you're in a streaming league, meaning a daily change league where you can plug him in there, Saturday there's not many games. You can get him in there and get some extra blocks and get you over that edge. Jarrett Culver's been really coming on. I think I mentioned him last week, said I was still a little skeptical, not sure. Young guy in Minnesota. But there's some more time for him available, and he's been contributing well all around. 42% ownership. I think he's worth picking up and looking at this week with his 4 games. Again, he's got that Saturday game, so if you're playing in a daily change league, that's a little advantageous. But he's also worth probably a season-long hang on. Along those same lines, sekou doumbouya. I love sekou. I thought he's going to, in the draft, I thought he slipped a little further than I expected, and I really like him. Detroit now has kind of embraced the rebuild. Almost fortunate that Blake is hurt because it's kind of maybe forced them to read the tea leaves a little more and say, yeah, this isn't happening. So Sekou's getting a ton of run. He gets 4 games. Washington, Sacramento, Memphis, and Brooklyn. 2 of those teams are the best 5 matchups you could have. But Sacramento and Brooklyn, you aren't afraid of either. Sekou should get a lot of run. If people haven't been paying attention, he could explode this week. And 35% ownership. It's not just this week I want you to get him. I want you to get him for the season. If he's still available, I think you should find a way to get sekou on there. Now, it could miss. I'm not guaranteeing that this is all going to work out. But I think there's definitely a chance. For reference, his last game, it was a dud. 4 points, 4 rebounds, nothing crazy. But before that, 24 points, 2 rebounds, 1 assist. 16 points, 8 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal. Well, both those games he had 1 steal. So it's definitely more heavy to points, getting a couple threes a game. But he's a young guy just starting. If he's getting these minutes, up at 30 minutes a game, maybe up to 35 as they start playing him more and he gets used to it, there's a real chance that this week is a really good week for him. But again, when I say that, it's relative to the other things, right? There's a reason he's only 35% owned. But if you can get him now, he's available in 2/3 of the league. You should get him on your roster. Kris Dunn, I'm a little uncomfortable with the fact that I keep recommending Kris Dunn because this is not really one of my favorite players. It also makes me seem like too much of a Bulls homer, and that's not it. But Kris Dunn is averaging 2.1 steals per game. He's picking everyone's pocket, and he plays 4 games this week. Chicago is going against Milwaukee, Minnesota, Sacramento, Cleveland. You're not afraid of those matchups. In fact, you actually probably like to get some of those matchups. And at 2 steals a game, here's the opportunity. Only 29% owned. 4 games, averaging 2 steals a game. You could get 8 steals right there. If you're looking at your opponent and you're in a close matchup, this is a great spot to plug them into that utility, get 8 more steals, and lock up a category. So for points leagues, maybe not that interesting for you. But if you're playing a category league, Kris Dunn's not really going to hurt you. I mean, he's not scoring enough to really help you there, so maybe that's hurting you. But you can plug him in and as a real specialist and get that the way I recommend Mcgee as a block specialist. All right, those are the 10 players I was going to do, but I'm not really going to subject myself to the tyranny of my own graphics and limit myself there. A couple other players I want to call out. So Jay Crowder is is owned in only 27% of leagues. He's also averaging 2.2 steals over the last 2 weeks, 3 months. No, sorry, 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So that puts him in the top 3 in the NBA for steals. We already talked about Memphis' schedule when I talked about Dillon Brooks. They've got 4 games. They've got good matchups this week. Jay Crowder, he gives you a little bit of everything. He's also just one of those players I like. But you grab him and play him. Next off my little notepad here, we got Troy Brown Jr. He's 31% owned for Washington. Last game he's coming off of, 22 points, 8 rebounds, 1 assist, 3 steals, and he's available. Washington plays 4 games, Detroit, Miami, Cleveland, Atlanta. So Miami's the only team there where you're maybe a little afraid. You get 4 games, 2+ matchups. He could be a really good plug-in if you need some points and some threes. Also, 8 rebounds, you're not going to be afraid of that. But speaking of a guy you could plug in at shooting guard, small forward. Oh, shoot, I meant to mention it. Kris Dunn, part of the reason he keeps making this list is he's got 3 position eligibility. So not only are you getting 2.1 steals, you can play him at point guard, shooting guard, or small forward. That flexibility when you're wanting to get a specialist in there is really advantageous. That's why I think Dunn should just have a higher ownership. Some team who's looking towards the playoffs, I think should grab him if they've got the spot on the bench and just lock him up there because that flexibility could help you with an injury. Sorry. Off of Kris Dunn, I want to talk about Hart. So Josh Hart's plays for New Orleans. So they get Memphis, San Antonio, Denver, Boston. So you're not super excited about the Denver-Boston matchup, but Memphis, San Antonio, you're not afraid of. The nice thing about him is you can play him as shooting guard or small forward, and he's getting rebounds. We're talking a shooting guard who's getting rebounds the last 4 games, 10, 7, 6, 9. If you can play him at shooting guard, you're going to get a real advantage there. If you're looking at your opponent in a category league and want to take someone down, this could be the key. Threes and rebounds are in there. It's also the last 2 games, he's gotten 3 steals each. He's only 26% owned, so he's available in most leagues. Almost 75% of the leagues, you could pick up Josh Hart and play him, and he's not really hurting you anywhere. Yeah, his field goal percentage isn't great, but if you're slotting him into your shooting guard, it's not so bad. As for the bad matchups at the end of the week, Denver and Boston, I went back the last time he played Boston, 9 rebounds. Last time he played Denver, which I think was Christmas Day, also 9 rebounds. So even in the negative matchups, he's still getting 9 rebounds. If you can slot in a shooting guard, he's getting you 9 rebounds. That's going to give you a huge advantage. I think Josh Hart should get some serious looks in teams. If you're looking at your opponent and you're diving in that deep, there's a good chance that he could help you win your week with rebound matchup alone. And he's going to get you some threes. He's going to get you some points. It's not a ton of points, but at 35 minutes, you never know when he's going to explode. And for the first couple of games, against Memphis or San Antonio, he's got a chance. All right, I think that'll do it for me this week. Hope it helped you with the schedule breakdown. Went a little further with the waivers. We'll see. I got a lot of new viewers last week, and that was really exciting. So I wanted to dive in, keep giving you stuff to help you guys out. Thanks for watching. Have a good week. Go out there and win.